Right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our World Affairs Fridays program. This week, we are delighted to learn from Joshua Zulu. He has got some slides that will introduce himself. And so with that, I'm going to turn it right over to you, Josh. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I would like to thank Angela and the Peoria Area World Affairs Council for inviting me to talk about myself and, of course, the country I came from. I will talk about my personal American journey, including academic and professional careers. Then I'll talk a little bit more about Zambia and Africa as a whole in terms of what is happening now and potential for future development. Because I was there in 2017 and things are moving very fast. There are a lot of things that are happening, and a lot of those economies down there are moving really fast, and you have to be present to win, especially for companies like Caterpillar. My personal story, of course, is covered in more detail in my book, Capture the Sun. I'll send a link to my website to Angela. The book, of course, is available in paperback and ebook from Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You may have to order it specially, I would think. It came out at the same time as Michelle Obama's book, so there wasn't no shelf space for people like me. So let's go ahead here. I retired from Caterpillar after about 32 and a half years work. I did some work before joining Caterpillar, about 7 years, and you'll know where I did that work within the presentation here. Of course, I'm currently residing in Germantown Hills with my wife, Mary. I had a great career at Caterpillar, and I traveled around the world and did a lot of work around the world. And when I came back, went to Engine Division and then retired at the end of 2012. Yeah, of course, being a Zulu, of course, means I need to talk about my roots. I am a descendant of the Zulu tribe, but born in Zambia. Some of you may know that the Zulus are mostly in South Africa. It's one of the biggest tribes. There are about 15 million of them in South Africa. And then when you look at some of the people that left South Africa as warriors, and Shaka Zulu, if you remember, they migrated north into Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and then, of course, my group ended up in Zambia, on the eastern side of Zambia. Of course, they were warriors, and they fought against another bigger tribe, the Bembas, and of course, they didn't win, and so they settled in Zambia, and that's the group that I'm from. My father was the last person in my group to speak the original Zulu language, so I speak 3 other languages, but they're more extracts of the Zulu language. Okay. I am one of 9 children, primarily subsistence and peasant farmers. But my dad was self-employed. He was a tailor, and he used to buy cloth, sew cloth, and buy cloth and sew dresses and pants, and then go into the rural areas to sell to the villagers. And of course, as such, all of us in the family, the kids from grade school to high school, we learned how to work the fields, and of course, we learned how to sew clothes. So let's talk about Zambia. Zambia is a British colony, landlocked, and when you look at the map that I have there, at the corner, the top left corner, you see Africa, and then a little rectangle. That rectangle shows what this map is. Lower right hand corner shows the flag of Zambia. You will notice that it is landlocked, but a lot of these countries, of course, are moving at about the same pace. And Zambia actually transitions from colonialism to independence more or less peacefully. Most everybody else around them had a lot of prolonged wars. And of course, during that time, Zambia more or less suffered with people, guerrilla fighters coming through Zambia to go fight in Zimbabwe, in Namibia, in Angola, and Mozambique. So, but that was the case at the time, but they're all now settled and are concentrating on developing their own countries. They have some of the fastest growing middle class groups. And you'll see some of those numbers that the African Business Resources Group at Caterpillar had put together some time ago. And they're targeting those areas to try and help develop the countries, because basically if you help develop the countries, you'll be part of their opportunities of growing your business. And Caterpillar is working on that. Of course, the Zambia overview I gave you, it's the same as what you have here, where it's landlocked in South Central Africa. It became independent in 1964 without any major wars, but the surrounding countries, of course, had major wars for independence. And Zambia is basically looked at as a very politically stable country by African standards. The economy is driven mostly by copper mining, and there are other minerals like zinc and lead and some gold too. Let's talk about how I came to America. Well, I left Zambia on a student exchange program. There used to be a student exchange program whereby a whole bunch of American students that wanted to study in Africa would leave Africa and then stop several places, drop off the students, and then African students would come on that airplane and come to the US. The scholarship program was called the ASPAL, which is African Scholarship Program for American Universities. I don't think it exists anymore. I think it died at the end of the 70s. I came here and I attended Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, and I was studying aeronautical engineering. Some of you may wonder, how did I end up at Purdue? Basically, the dean of men at Purdue was the one that accompanied the students on the airplane that went to Africa, and he was the one that interviewed the students in Africa and brought them over with him on the return journey to university. And at that time, Purdue was a prime engineering school for aeronautical engineering. So that's how he chose me to go to Purdue. I had a hard time with Purdue, as you can imagine, but when you look at what it was at the time, of course, it was called the cradle of American astronauts, because about 40% of the American space astronauts have gone through Purdue. And of course, including the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. So I enrolled in that program. What I liked most about the program, of course, was flying. So I enrolled in that and I completed pilot training. But you needed to do commercial pilot licensing in order to continue, but it was very expensive. And the best way to continue was joining the Army. So I, for a short time, signed up to say, well, I'll do it, because the Army said they would pay for me for my education, first degree, second degree, and third degree. That means BSc, MS, and PhD. The only problem was that after training, I would have had to go to Vietnam. And that was at the peak of the Vietnam War. And I remember watching television and young people coming back from war and being taunted by protesters as they came in. And I was at Purdue when the National Guard shot a student and killed a student at Kent State University in Ohio. So as you can imagine, I switched to mechanical engineering. So how was my college experience? And you can imagine, the first 2 years were the hardest. And typically, I was 10,000 miles away from home. I didn't know anybody, and all by myself. For 1,000 miles, I didn't know anybody. I mean, for 10,000 miles, basically, I just didn't know anybody. And the courage curriculum, of course, was very rigorous. And I realized as soon as I arrived that I really hadn't prepared well for college, because my school in Africa would not have been as good for preparation as being in a high school in the US. So I had to read material many, many times. I believe I had to read material maybe 5 times before I could understand it, compared to a guy maybe reading it the same for the same kid doing the same class. And of course, you can imagine language and accent. Language was different, accent was fast. And at the time, I don't know, some people that have maybe learned another language, when I first came here, I didn't think in English, because English was more like my third language. So I had to read a lot in order to keep up and be able to take the tests and pass. Something, of course, that hit me in the first 2 years was that I had to explain my presence in a lot of classes, because there weren't that many kids, black kids, in engineering. I think I was the only kid in my engineering classes, and I used to have to carry my schedule with me. So professors would say, "Are you in the right class?" And say, "Yeah, I am." They would check my schedule, and yes, I was. And but I made it. And of course, the other thing is the weather, especially cold weather. I was used to Zambia, whereby the temperatures, the lowest temperatures in the winter, which would be in Zambia, June and July, opposite of here. The coldest temperatures you get was like 40 degrees, and that would be maybe 5 days in the year that you'd have go down to 40 degrees. The highest temperatures, of course, either way, not as hot as here for me coming from Zambia, because Zambia is about 3,000 to 5,000 feet above sea level. So the temperature is more or less mild. And the higher temperatures of 90, maybe to 100 were only in the river valleys. So I had a hard time with that. I remember winter time, the first time I went out on a morning when they had, what do you call it, black ice. I started walking out there like Johnny Walker, and of course I fell a few times and learned you don't do that. You're supposed to walk like a penguin. So I learned quickly about that. And of course, next thing was about culture. A lot of things I learned about culture within those first 2 years were kind of strange, and I thought I might put those up here. I was impressed with the American work ethic. I think that's because it related more to the peasant farming, whereby you get you get output from what you put in. So it's like a tit for tat. You have to have a good work ethic to be a good peasant farmer. So that worked out real well. And of course, I learned quickly, Americans were very, very curious people. They asked a lot more questions. And before going to school, we had orientation class out in Vermont for all the students, African students, a big camp. And we learned a lot about the transition into the culture. And we discussed a lot of these things at that time, and I can tell you some of our own perceptions. We thought it was strange when it came to the commercial drive of culture. And of course, when I talk about commercial drive of culture, I'm talking about the gift giving whereby a lot of the people, you know, if you found something good and you bought it, you gave it to someone, you didn't have to wait for a specific date driven by a commercial date that you have to give someone. And then you had to be careful in the US because if you gave a gift outside any of those gift giving days, like it didn't count. You have to get one for that next day, see? So that was just some of the things we learned. We also learned there was among the American kids and other people within the society was that there was more or less like a drive to be liked instead of drive to be respected. Because a lot of the older cultures, I think people tended to want to be more respected than being liked. But I noticed that that culture of being liked, a lot of people were more into that in the US than a lot of the students that I came out here with. Somehow I thought maybe that probably just translated into the politics here, like if people vote for who they like, not so much for who they respect. I mean, that's just a perception, but anyway, that's the way things are. And then, of course, there was also the absence of a neutral perspective on things. You know, when someone says, "Oh, can you try this, eat this?" and if you say, "Oh, do you like it?" and if you say, "Oh, I don't know whether I like it," oh boy, you have to decide whether or not you like it or not, because Americans tend to force you to not to have a neutral perspective about things. They want you either you like it or you don't like it. And of course, at the time I first came here, you can imagine the American infatuation with size. And that was cars, trucks, houses, food servings, and of course the people. You know, when I went to Purdue, I was 5'7", and I got to Purdue 1 week early. When everybody arrived, they went in 6'8", and the average was like 6'4" tall. So that was something that I, kind of learned real quickly about. But I graduated from Purdue with a degree in mechanical engineering, and my first job was a design engineer at General Electric. And what I did there was I used to design diesel electric locomotives. So I trained in design, as well as I took some work also doing service engineering. In fact, did some service engineering over in Atlanta. And while I was there, of course, I found out that Zambia Railways, my home railway company, operated General Electric locomotives. So guess what? Someone from Zambia recruited me to go work for Zambia Railways on their railroad. So I went back to Zambia, where I was leading the design, maintenance, and service of railway equipment on Zambia Railways. It was a very challenging job because there weren't that many other technical people that knew a lot about machines. So I had to be the principal person. In fact, within about 2-3 years, I was a chief engineer on Zambia Railways, a chief mechanical engineer for railway equipment. And I spent a lot of time working with people on British Rail that used to try and help. At that time, Zambia Railways was also helped in terms of administration by Canadian National Railway, because when Zambia became independent, a lot of the people that used to work on the railroad had been from England and other countries. And when Zambia became independent, they left. So the Canadian National Railway was asked to help with transitioning, training the people so that Zambians could take over in the future. But at that time, of course, the greatest challenge was finding technical solutions to political problems, because there was still a whole bunch of wars going on around Zambia. And sometimes it would have the railway line blown up. And then there was a time when Zambians couldn't talk to people in Zimbabwe. I mean, a Zambian could not go to Zimbabwe. But we were having contracts to move freight from South African ports all the way into the Democratic Republic of Congo. I remember one time where we, if we have a freight train going to Zimbabwe, before we get to the border of Zimbabwe, you take the locomotive from the front of the train and put it on the back, and then push it across the border, and then call the guy in Zimbabwe and say, I put a train on the border, you go in and pick it up. And then they put a locomotive on and take it on into Zimbabwe. It was crazy, but that's what you had to deal with. Anyway, after 5 years, I decided to come back to America. When I first came back to US, of course, I had my wife Mary come back a little earlier, maybe 6 months early. When I arrived myself, I think I had probably $124 in my pocket. So I had to start from ground zero. So I went and looked for an entry-level job. First one was at a little company called Heister, and I was designing forklift trucks in Danville, Illinois. And they were a supplier to Caterpillar. So later on, someone called me from Caterpillar. I never really applied for a job at Caterpillar, but they found me. And I joined Caterpillar in 1980, starting at entry level again. A lot of the people that would have been at the same level as me had moved up because they'd been with Caterpillar from the time they graduated from school.
That's good, right in the palm. Good. Right there.
So I went ahead anyway and got myself an MBA, and also became a professional engineer, licensed in Illinois. Basically, that allowed me to charter a personal engineering and marketing career, where I became a prime product development engineer. And then I went on to be a person who develops products for expanding Caterpillar product line. And one of those I did was, I used to be the powertrain engineer that put together engine, transmission, axle, and tires for a small company in Tasmania to build special underground mining machines. And once they became 80% Caterpillar content, we bought them, and they became the underground mining division of Caterpillar. Then I moved on to another company called Tiger Engineering, where I used to help build large wheel dozers. Those were used in coal. Dozing coal at power plants. It was a special design, and when they became 80% Caterpillar content, we bought them, and they became part of our big dozer group. So, and then they sent me to Europe, where I started developing machines in material handling, like logs and logging machines, and some carrying machines, and then converting excavators into cranes and things like that. So I was in Belgium for about 5 years. And then when I came back, I went to engine division, and I had worldwide responsibility for engines, machine engines for wheel loaders, excavators out of Aurora and Japan. And then while I was there as an engineering manager, I also went into becoming a master black belt. So with all of the products that I've done, for some of you that might be interested, my career summary was put on LinkedIn, because when I retired, I had a lot of input from people around the world, and they wanted to access it, so we put it on LinkedIn. And if anybody wants a link, I'll give that to Angela. Of course, I retired in 2012, at the end of 2012. I wanted to work on home projects, take time to travel. I promised my wife that I would take her to any of the places that I had worked in. And of course, she's kind of held me to that. So we've traveled quite a bit. We've traveled at least somewhere out of the country, at least twice a year or something like that. Of course, I always loved hanging around with the kids, grandkids. And in my spare time at home, I'm on the board of trustees for the Germantown water supply company. That helps me, keeps me busy. And of course, I published my book, Capture the Sun. It covers my whole life story. Sorry, I passed. So at the end of this, of course, I thought to throw in a couple of observations. And one of the things I always talk to my kids about, of course, and my nephews, of nothing ever gets in the way of a good work ethic. And I think of all the places, even with all the places that I've traveled in, that is very true. And I tell my kids and my nephews a lot of times that if you exhibit a good work ethic, whether it's in a friendly or non-friendly environment, someone is bound to notice and give you an opportunity to move on. Of course, I always talk about the fact that godly given talent is evenly distributed around the world. And what do I mean by that? I believe that, and I tell I tell my children, of course, my grandkids, somewhere out where in the world, there's someone who can and the fact that unfortunately, but that's the way life is, opportunity is controlled by human beings. If you could spread opportunity evenly, you find that there's a lot more talent out there for human development. And if we tapped all of that, I can imagine that we would all be 10 to 20 years ahead of where we are now in terms of human development. Now, having said that, I went back into working with some young Caterpillar people and found out that Caterpillar has set up what they call ABRG, African Business Resources Group. And they've launched a program called T4A in 2016. And that T4A, of course, stands for Technicians for Africa. And what it is a free online technical education aimed at Africa. And I looked at this as being something that will give kids an opportunity to show talents in terms of technical capability. And basically, they can go online if they have a computer and take courses in Caterpillar machine systems, whether it's electronics or hydraulics. That way, and they can take a test, and then they can use that certificate to go get a job anywhere, including at a Caterpillar dealership. So I thought that was really, really good for Caterpillar to do that. And so the slides that I'm going to show you, the next 2-3 slides, of course, talk to what Caterpillar had done versus what they were when I was retiring. You see this slide here, it shows the Cat machine plant locations, and focused here on North America. You can see in the background there's a North American map. If you look on the top left corner, you see I have East Peoria, and 2 lines from East Peoria, they point to Illinois. That's where the machines are produced. You see the tractors and pipe layers up there. Then you go to Decatur, big trucks and scrapers, and they also point to Illinois. And then you see it points to Little Rock, Arkansas, I think. You see the ones that are in green, I think more engine related. The ones in yellow are machine. Now this is just, focused on this just to show you what the North American footprint is. And then the next slide will show you what the world footprint is. So you can see, again, up on your left at the top, North America, and then below North America, we have an area there where, South America. And then above Africa, you see Europe, and then way out east, of course, to the right side, you see China, and the little company I told you about way down below in Tasmania, Australia. But one thing I noticed that at that time when we put this chart together while I was working in Caterpillar was, not a single product was produced in Africa. I wasn't very happy about that because I thought Africa had the potential to do that. And I don't think it was because they couldn't do it, because other companies were producing machines there. General Electric was producing locomotives there. Hitachi produces construction equipment in Zambia. BMW produces cars there, and you can buy a car built in South Africa in Peoria. And then there was a company by the name of Bell that builds construction equipment in South Africa. So I think Caterpillar has to do a little bit more. I mean, that's just my opinion anyway. And I know that they're going to do more. One information later on which I had access to, and I'll show you what that is. The opportunities is immense. If you look at some of the numbers on this chart, you'll be surprised to know that they are now the fastest growing economies. If you think of Africa, you see that you can fit China, the US, and all of Europe in it. And they have like 10% of the oil reserves. 16 out of 26 fastest growing economies are out of there. Imagine 600 million people without access to electricity. So those people will need that electricity, so there will be development out there. And there is development. The fastest middle class growth in the world, they are now. It says 2 billion people, the population 2 billion by 2050. And they say 1,000 languages. Don't worry about that. What says 1,000 languages? They all communicate in two, French and English. And of course, they have a lot of work to be done in terms of infrastructure. 92 billion. 30% of the world's mineral reserves are out there. So, just like the caption I put at the bottom, Caterpillar has to be present in Africa to win. And I'm glad they've started doing that. Used to be that the US was one of the #1 economies, trading partners in Africa, but they've slipped to being way back. I think trading between the US and Africa is just half of what the Chinese are doing. So having said that, that T4A program that Caterpillar has, of course, is going to go a long way in developing young people, especially in terms of, which was the last slide here, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs. Basically, when you train young people, just like I was trained in the US, by the time I got back to Zambia, whose products was I promoting? Of course, American products. I have a niece who is in China now, she's training to be a civil engineer. And of course, by the time she goes back, I'm sure she's going to be working for a Chinese company. So anyway, having said all of that, I guess you can all understand that, Africa has challenges, but anyone that helps with their challenges is going to end up reaping some of the benefits in terms of opportunity for their own growth. Because at some point in time, everybody has to realize, which, like I say a lot of times, I would like to see an African promoting Caterpillar products to Africans. Just like when you go to a dealership here to buy a car from, let's say, at a Toyota dealership, you don't have a Japanese person doing it. What you have is an American promoting your Toyota to you. It's a big, big difference when you do that. Big difference to your buying choice. Basically, that's what I would think we need to aim at. Someone promoting a Caterpillar machine to an African that promoting the Caterpillar machine to another African would make a much bigger difference than an American promoting an American product to an African. So with all of that, I guess we can open up for questions that you might have and might have answers to. By the way, Zambia's the size of Zambia. I guess I forgot to mention Zambia is about 10% bigger than Texas, and the population of Zambia is about 18 million. Okay.
Well, that's a good place for me to ask my first question, because Zambia lives in a tough neighborhood. So your story about the train pushing the cars to the edge of Zimbabwe and then calling Zimbabwe and having them come to the border and pick up the train of goods is interesting, because the relationship is still a bit difficult, mostly because of the economic situation in Zimbabwe. How is Zambia affected by its neighbors? Which ones help Zambia grow and which ones drag Zambia down?
Yeah, I think right now, I think we still have Zimbabwe. What happened is Zimbabwe at one time, if you remember, they threw a whole bunch of people who were Zimbabweans, but they were white farmers. Remember, they were British and they lived there, and a lot of their farms were taken away. But there's a whole bunch of them who have moved to Zambia, and they are one of the biggest farming blocks in Zambia. And there's an area called Mkushi area, and of course these are people that were experienced with the large machines, and they employ a lot of people in that farming community. They're one of the most productive group in terms of food for export. So we took advantage of that with Zimbabwe, but they still have issues, and we have refugees still out of
Rwanda.
Out of Rwanda. We have refugees still out of Congo, because Congo really has never settled as much. They have wars every once in a while, and until it settles down, refugees, a lot of refugees are in Zambia.
Would you mind going back to the slide that shows the part of Africa, the neighborhood around Zambia?
Okay.
And I'll come up with another question here. Yeah, this one here.
Okay.
Yeah, so the DR Congo has got some ongoing issues. So those folks are coming across into Zambia. And of course, just poverty and drought and other issues have also driven people on the move. Where else does Zambia have its greatest challenges?
There's still some problems in Mozambique. When you look at Mozambique, they have problems. Their guerrilla fighting never really ended as such. So there's still unrest, and we have issues with that. Malawi is okay, and Malawi, of course, a lot of the Malawians are related more or less to the Zulus of the eastern part of Zambia. And of course, Tanzania, we've always had good relations with Tanzania. And we're now getting to start. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask about people getting along together. So go ahead and answer.
Yeah, so we're now cooperating quite a bit more with each other. And just like you and I had talked, we're building a bridge between Zambia, and it's going directly into Botswana, right at the point where Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia meet. There's like 3 countries at one little spot. I don't know whether you can see my arrow right down here. So there's a new bridge out there, so they'll have much better traffic for trade going across there. And once they do that, towns like Livingston, which are right at the border, close to the border with Zimbabwe, they'll start booming. And they're building new 4-lane highways from Lusaka going up north all the way into what we used to have as a copper belt. So when you have 4-lane highways, of course, you double and speed up the economy quite a bit.
Interesting.
Botswana, Botswana. We always had a good relationship with Botswana. They produce some of the world's greatest beef, and they export beef to Europe. Lots of beef, because Botswana, just like most other tribes, in Zambia, having cattle was one of those big treasures, and they've benefited from that. They have very good cattle, big, nice. They call them beasts, and they do a lot of exporting of beef to Europe.
So for those of you who didn't notice the picture on the website about this program, I took that picture of the river where we crossed in January when Don and I and Lee were in South Africa, Southern Africa rather, for vacation. And there were hundreds and hundreds of trucks lined up on either side of that river that cuts between Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. And they were building a river, but literally on each side of the river, as far as you could see, and even further than you couldn't see, semis with loads waiting to cross the river. So the opening of that bridge, the expansion of faster moving traffic will be an incredible growth spurt for that part of Africa. You also mentioned that Zambia is more known for its copper, but it has a little bit of gold. Do any of those minerals pose a problem or raise any threats from elsewhere to get access to those minerals?
Yeah, they are mining some of that gold. There's a government company that is involved now that puts investments in mines. They take shares so that instead of a private company owning everything, this government entity is now, it's like a commercial group that has shares in all these mining activity, the mining companies that are sprouting up in Zambia, because new mines are being found, and of course that generates requirements for roads and things like that to be built. Like right now, the northwest of Zambia, I don't know whether you can see my arrow there, around here, that's where we have now new copper mines. The other ones were more like in the middle, but these are out west, and they're big findings that now they're building the infrastructure to go and mine that.
Very good. So is Zambia a good place where those kinds of investments make their way back to the people, or does Zambia suffer from some of the other ills of the government taking its chunk before anybody else gets to benefit from these resources?
Yeah, I think I say that because of the fact that they have this, there's a company called NCCM, which is the Zambian company that invests in these mines. They are savvy enough that they take enough account of what the production is and make sure that the benefits go to the people. Because when a mine is created anymore, they don't just create a mine. They always build their own, they always build houses for the people that work for the mines. So they build the infrastructure for that. And of course, once you do that, then other commercial things like malls. I mean, there are a lot of them. Zambia is one. It's kind of crazy when I was there in 2017. They have so many malls and little suburbs. So they're creating these little suburbs anymore that, just like the US did many years ago. And they can thrive on their own. Small suburbs can thrive on their own if they keep, that what you would call the average level of salary within a certain area. At a certain level, they can live a pretty good life. And a lot of people, if you were making like $3,000 a month in a place like Zambia, you would do really well.
Very good. Do you find a return of people who left Zambia earlier? Is there a reverse diaspora of folks coming back to Zambia to help them develop and and grow?
Not that much. And there are a lot of Zambians that live, for example, in England. A lot of trained people. Zambia has a lot of people that are trained just like me that live outside. And what we've done, of course, we've sent money back. I've helped put quite a few of my nephews and nieces through school. And I always look at that as in such a way that when the boom starts catching up, a lot of those people will be going back. I'm one of those people that would have gone back in a heartbeat, but I'm a typical product person. I like to start with a clean sheet of paper, draw something, cut the metal, weld it, and then see it work. And you didn't have those industries in Zambia, see? You just didn't have those industries. You had the agricultural side, yes. The mining was different. I wasn't into mining. So I knew that, well, one of the reasons I went to Europe was that, if that opportunity was in Africa, I would have been there in a heartbeat.
Interesting. When did, I see Mary is on the event as well. Good morning, Mary. How did you guys meet? When did you guys get married? If not too personal.
I met Mary at Purdue. I met her there, and so we started hanging out and in groupies, and of course, I always say, I was a very, very serious student. So if people wanted to go to parties, I would say they can go to parties, but and then I started hanging out with Mary, and I would say, well, I'm not going to go to a party. She would come and hang out for me when I went to study. So that's how we bonded. She had the lowest maintenance for me.
You and my husband would get along very well. Low maintenance women really rank high. There you go.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
That's leading to my next question, though. So on some of your trips post retirement, I'm sure you have been back to Zambia to visit your family.
Yes.
And has your family come to the United States to visit you?
Yes, we've had family come here. I had all my sisters and brothers have been here. Some came, for your information, my oldest brother's children all live in the US because he used to be a director in the International Monetary Fund. He lives back in Zambia. He did economics in the US many years ago. He was 14 years older than me. But his children live there, so when they had weddings, everybody came, and I brought some of my sisters all the way up to here. And then I have my oldest sister lives in Canada because her daughter did law in Zambia, and then she was recruited by the Canadian government to do law there, and then she stayed there.
Okay.
So she works on what do you call this? First Nation affairs. That mean like in Canadian Indian affairs law.
Oh,
she
sure.
practices. Yeah.
Okay.
In Canada.
Interesting. So people from Zambia have relocated all around the world into all sorts of professions. Is there a potential for creating businesses among the diaspora community? It sounds like you have lots of immigrants who are educated and then move to someplace else, but do those people someplace else, like the project you worked on with Caterpillar, for example, to encourage them to become more active in not just selling products in Africa, but building them there, training people there to fix them, that sort of thing. Are those kinds of movements common among Zambians around the world?
No, I haven't seen any of that. I know that one of the things I did when I was chief engineer on Zambia Railways, I did technology transfer project, whereby I took some of my own young engineers in Zambia and sent them to Sweden on a CEDA, Swedish International Development Aid Program, where they learned how to build freight cars for the railroad. So you send them over there, and then they learn how to build freight cars in a factory in Sweden, and then you send them back with all the equipment they were using. And by the time they came back, they could do anything just like any of this experienced Swedish people within 9 months.
Neat.
They were building freight cars in Zambia.
Okay. And does
But
Caterpillar
the
have
economy went, yeah, so that's why I say you can do those things, but someone has to have the courage
yeah,
to do it.
very interesting though. Let's see. From your last chart that you had put up about Caterpillar, it did not show any plants where equipment was built yet in Africa. Has Caterpillar upgraded since your retirement? Have they opened any new?
I don't know. I don't think so. I've asked some of the people that are out there. I don't think so. But all I'm saying is you have to be present to win.
Right. The opportunity.
The Chinese are there.
Yeah.
They are. They are building. And Hitachi has a construction equipment plant in Zambia. So they're supplying to the mining as well, the construction. And it's just that most people don't realize when you look at countries like this in Africa, these are poor countries. So for any machine that they get, it's so expensive when it's shipped because they have to pay for the freight. You look at the body of a truck, a big truck that is empty, but when you put it on a ship, you pay for the volume. So by the time it reaches those people who are poor, they pay a lot more. So your best, if you can even just assemble them there, you don't have to do everything there, just assemble them and let them just do the welding part of it, and everything else comes from the US or any other country. You can do that, but it's one of those things that it's difficult to understand, but it's a decision that a company has to make consciously. Yeah. There's always money to be made. You have to remember that it doesn't matter what country we go into, anywhere in the world, no matter what taxes they do, we always make money. And that's why we are there.
Yeah.
So we can do anything anywhere.
So is China Zambia's biggest trading partner, or what countries are Zambia's biggest trading partners?
I think it's the UK, the United Kingdom, I think Australia, because Australia has a lot of mining too, and then China. But China has come up, I think they might be #1 now because they've taken on a lot more projects.
Yeah.
They're building the highways, the 4-lane highways, the bridges, and then they've also built what you call small. They've come up with small economic zones because you wouldn't believe, but a lot of Chinese people are moving out of China and becoming Zambian citizens. Lots of them.
Does Zambia have a stable government and peaceful transition of power?
Yes, they've had peaceful transition of power all the way from the time in 1964 through. It's always been good. They still are, even by European standards, still one of the most stable, political places around Africa.
Sure, good.
And they've honored a lot of the trade treaties that they've had with other people. Every once in a while, they'll go wrong in terms of,
We can't all have good presidents all the time.
No, you just can't. That's just the way life is, everywhere, politics, 2 + 2 is not, it's supposed to be equal to 4, but it can be equal to any number in politics. So
right.
There's nothing you can do about that.
And how has COVID-19 impacted Zambia? How is your family?
My family is doing okay, and Zambia has fared fairly well. When you think of a population of 18, and I think they only had maybe less than 100 deaths and about 13,000 cases within about last week. So
And
yeah,
mostly in the
they've done
city.
it, especially in the cities.
Yeah.
And a lot of and the way it started was it started by someone from France and someone from Pakistan, came with a cluster of about 20, and it bloomed from then on. And it would have been really bad if any more foreigners had come in that way. It was just that when you get into some of these very, people live in the places where they're very close to each other, those shanty compounds around the big cities.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been really, really bad.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad it hasn't been awful. One of our folks in the chat says, "Can Zambia teach the United States how to have a peaceful transition of power?"
Yeah.
That would be good, but
It would be. Yes. It's one
yeah.
of those things. It sounds simple, but it's core to the peaceful living among people.
Yes. I did miss one question earlier. Does Zambia have a national airline?
No, they don't, but they are trying to create one. They already have. They've already put together a plan, and what they're going to do was that they were going to tag with Ethiopian Airlines. So they're going to be like a subsidiary of Ethiopian Airlines, and it'll be Zambia Airways, but it'll be like a subsidiary of Ethiopian Airlines, because Ethiopian Airlines is the best airline in Africa right now.
Yeah, don't
It used to
partner
be
with
South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't partner with
Used to be
South Africa right now.
Yeah, South Africa used to have the best airline for a while, but they've kind of messed it up with they introduced too much politics.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think that is all of the questions. Unless anybody has a last minute question, we've reached our time. And Josh, this has been really informative and very engaging. I will share that I'm trying to convince him that when COVID is all over, perhaps next year or the year after, he has a few projects where he's helping his relatives back home build schools and that sort of thing, and do projects to help their local populations. And as a great do-it-yourselfer, I told him to let me know when he goes. I loved Africa when I visited. And so maybe some of you also would like to pick up a hammer and join us in a great project back in Zambia. So with that, don't forget to become a member of the World Affairs Council. Next week, we have John Paul Phelan, the Honorable John Paul Phelan. He is a minister of Ireland's Parliament. He's going to talk about Ireland in particular, but of course, some of the big issues on the table are Brexit and how the UK's decision to change their divorce decree, if you will, for Northern Ireland will affect the Republic of Ireland. So do register for that. Remember, PAWAC members, I sent you a code. So it is free for PAWAC members. If you'd like to become a member, I'll send you the code. But we've got a lot of terrific programs lined up for October and November. You won't want to miss a thing. Any last minute questions? Well, I will thank you again, Joshua. This was really informative, and have a terrific weekend, everyone.